Last flowers before the nursing home. My daughter-in-law handed me a bouquet with a card that said those cruel words. At the end of the event, I took the microphone and revealed her secret. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought a bouquet of flowers could hurt so much. But there I was, Marie Wilson, 65 years old, sitting in the third pew of Oak Ridge Community Church on Mother's Day, clutching a beautiful arrangement of pink roses and white lilies that felt like a physical blow to my chest. My daughter-in-law, Victoria, had presented them to me with that perfect smile of hers, the smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Happy Mother's Day, Marie," she announced with deliberate volume, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. Several women turned to look, nodding with approval. What a thoughtful daughter-in-law, their expressions seemed to say. Then I opened the small envelope nestled between the blooms. The handwritten note inside read, "Last flowers before the nursing home." My fingers trembled visibly as I read those words again, desperately hoping I had misunderstood. The sanctuary suddenly felt suffocating, the air thick and oppressive around me. I glanced up to see Victoria whispering something to my son Thomas, her manicured hand possessively wrapped around his arm. She caught my eye and smiled with saccharine sweetness. This wasn't merely a tasteless joke or thoughtless comment. I recognized it immediately for what it truly was, a declaration of intent. For 3 long years, Victoria had been strategically dropping hints about how challenging it must be for me to maintain my penthouse. How concerned she was about me living alone. How prudent it would be to consider my options while I still retained the capacity to decide. Thomas always nodded along, rarely contradicting his wife of 8 years. I carefully folded the note and slipped it into my purse, forcing myself to breathe evenly despite my racing heart. Pastor Mitchell was concluding his sermon about honoring mothers. The irony was almost unbearable. Around me, other mothers beamed with genuine joy as their families leaned in close. The church atmosphere swelled with authentic affection and respect that made Victoria's cruelty even more stark. At the service's conclusion, families were invited to share what they cherished about their mothers. One by one, people rose, sons, daughters, even grandchildren, offering heartfelt words that brought both tears and smiles. Thomas remained seated, Victoria's hand firmly planted on his knee, controlling even this moment. Something inside me finally broke free. After 65 years of being the peacekeeper, of swallowing my words to maintain harmony, I had reached my absolute limit. "I'd like to say something," I said, raising my hand. Pastor Mitchell, surprised but pleased, handed me the microphone. My hands were surprisingly steady now as I stood. "Thank you for this beautiful service honoring mothers." I began, feeling unexpected strength flowing through me. Being a mother has been the greatest joy of my life. I locked eyes directly with my son. Thomas smiled uncertainly. Being a mother means protecting your children, even when they're grown. It means speaking uncomfortable truths when necessary, out of love. I paused, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs. Today, I received these lovely flowers with a note saying these would be my last flowers before the nursing home. Gasps rippled through the congregation, the sound washing over me like a wave. Thomas's face drained of color instantly. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm sharing this because for 3 years I've watched my daughter-in-law systematically try to separate me from my son. I've witnessed her control his finances, his schedule, and his relationships with painful precision. I've remained silent as she spread rumors about my mental capacity despite my clean bill of health just last month. Victoria's face contorted with fury, her perfect mask slipping. She grabbed Thomas's arm, whispering urgently, "I'm not going to any nursing home," I declared firmly. "And I'm no longer going to pretend this behavior is acceptable or normal. Families should lift each other up, not tear each other down." I handed the microphone back to Pastor Mitchell, whose face reflected both shock and compassion. As I walked down the aisle toward the exit, the silence felt overwhelming. Some people stared at their hymnals, unable to meet my eyes. Others watched me with newfound respect, perhaps seeing their own struggles reflected in mine. Behind me, I could hear Victoria's controlled voice. "Marie's been so confused lately. This is exactly what we've been worried about." I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the church and stepped into the bright May sunshine, my heart racing and my mind whirling with possibilities. For the first time in years, despite the pain and uncertainty that stretched before me, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The bouquet of flowers lay abandoned on the pew, its beauty forever tainted by the cruelty it had carried. The phone hadn't rung in 7 days. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of cooling tea between my hands, staring at the silent device as if my intense gaze could somehow bring it to life. Outside, spring rain tapped gently against the windows of the penthouse I'd called home for 30 years. The home where I'd raised Thomas after his father died. The home Victoria now coveted for herself. The text message from Thomas had arrived just hours after the church incident. "You've embarrassed us all." "Victoria's devastated. I need space right now." Space. That's what they called it nowadays when you cut your mother out of your life completely. I traced the rim of my teacup with my finger, feeling the smooth porcelain beneath my skin, remembering how different things had been before Victoria entered our lives. Thomas used to visit twice a week, sometimes just dropping by with coffee on his way to his architectural firm. We'd talk about everything and nothing: his latest design projects, my volunteer work at the library, the books we'd both enjoyed. There was a natural comfort between us, the kind that comes from years of truly knowing and valuing someone. Then came Victoria with her perfectly highlighted hair and impressive marketing director title. I'd been genuinely happy for Thomas at first. He deserved love after his difficult divorce from Carolyn. But I noticed the disturbing changes almost immediately. First, the spontaneous visits stopped abruptly. Everything had to be scheduled through Victoria. Then came the missed birthdays, the abbreviated holiday visits, the sudden cancellations whenever I suggested spending time with just Thomas. Gradually, my son transformed into a stranger who merely resembled someone I used to know intimately. "You're smothering him," Victoria had told me once, her voice honey-sweet but laced with venom. "He has his own life now. You should find one too." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each moment of my solitude. I should feel anger, I thought. Instead, all I felt was a profound sadness, a hollowness that echoed painfully inside me. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be Thomas. Instead, when I opened the door, I found Margaret Collins from church clutching a casserole dish, her expression uncertain. "I thought you might need this," she said, her eyes kind but clearly uncomfortable. "Chicken and wild rice." "Thank you, Margaret," I replied, accepting the dish, feeling the warmth through the glass. "Would you like to come in for a while?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at her car with obvious reluctance. "I'm afraid I can't stay." "Book club meeting." I immediately recognized the lie. The book club met on Thursdays, not Tuesdays. But I nodded anyway, understanding her discomfort. People rarely know how to respond to uncomfortable truths when confronted with them. "Marie," Margaret said suddenly, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "What you did was truly brave. Many of us have seen how Victoria treats you. But," she hesitated again, shifting her weight nervously, "Thomas came by Pastor Mitchell's office yesterday. He's saying you've been showing signs of confusion, that you've been imagining slights." The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket, crushing in its implication. So that was their calculated strategy. Make me seem mentally unstable and no one would believe my account. "Did he bring my medical records from Dr. Harrison?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "The ones from my comprehensive checkup last month that showed I'm perfectly healthy with exceptional cognitive function." Margaret looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "Marie, no one wants to take sides in something like this." "Thank you for the casserole," I said quietly, beginning to close the door. "Give my regards to the book club that isn't meeting today." Alone again, I placed the untouched casserole in the refrigerator and returned to my cold tea, watching the steam that had once risen from it completely disappear. My hand drifted to my purse where I'd kept Victoria's cruel note as evidence. Opening it, I felt a chill run through my entire body. The note was gone. I emptied the contents of my purse onto the table, searching frantically, my heart pounding. Nothing! Someone had taken it, most likely while I'd left my purse in the pew during my impromptu speech. Without that note, it was simply my word against Victoria's. The full realization of how vulnerable I truly was crashed over me. Thomas had medical power of attorney for me, something I'd done years ago after a brief hospitalization, never imagining it could be weaponized against me. I'd trusted my son completely with my health, my future, my life. Now that trust felt like a loaded gun pointed directly at my heart. For the first time, I considered that Victoria's joke about a nursing home might not be mere spite. It could be their actual plan, A plan that, with Thomas's legal power and Victoria's manipulations, they could potentially execute against my will and better judgment. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof like anxious fingers. My home, my sanctuary, suddenly felt dangerously exposed. I was alone, being painted as mentally unstable, and facing the very real possibility of losing my independence. As darkness fell, I made myself a simple dinner, barely tasting the food. The silence of the house pressed in around me like a physical presence. No call from Thomas, no apology, no reassurance that everything would be okay. Instead, my phone pinged with a text message. Not from Thomas, but from a number I didn't recognize, Marie. "It's Rebecca from the church choir." I saw what happened on Sunday. "I've been through something similar. Call me if you want to talk. You're not alone." I stared at the message for a long time, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life within my chest. Maybe I wasn't completely alone in this battle after all. I stared at Rebecca's phone number for 2 days before I finally called her. Something about reaching out felt like admitting defeat, acknowledging that my life had spiraled beyond my control and expertise. But as the silence from Thomas stretched into its second week, I realized I needed someone who truly understood. We met at Rosie's Diner, a small place on the outskirts of town where neither of us was likely to run into church members. Rebecca was older than me by a few years, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her eyes kind but weathered by difficult experiences. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "Most people don't. They try to handle these situations alone, thinking it's somehow their fault." "Handle what exactly?" I asked. Though deep down, I already knew the painful answer. "Elder abuse," she said plainly, her direct gaze never wavering. "Emotional manipulation. Isolation. What your daughter-in-law is doing to you, it's absolutely textbook." Her words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of recognition through me. I'd been so focused on the hurt, on Thomas's betrayal, that I hadn't properly named what was happening to me. "My daughter did the same thing to me," Rebecca continued, her voice steady. "Started with little comments about my memory. Then she took over my finances to help. Before I knew what was happening, I was sitting in a care facility, wondering how I'd lost control of my life so completely." My hands tightened around my cup, the warmth failing to penetrate the chill I felt inside. "How did you get out of that situation?" A small smile touched her lips. "I met Eleanor. She runs a support group for seniors experiencing family estrangement and abuse. She helped me understand my rights, connect with resources. Most importantly, she helped me see I wasn't alone in my struggle." She slid a small card across the table. "We meet Thursdays at the community center. No pressure, but it might help you more than you can imagine right now." I pocketed the card, not committing, but not refusing either. "There's something else you should know," Rebecca said, her voice lower now. "Victoria's been talking extensively, telling people at church that you've been behaving erratically for months. That the Mother's Day incident was just the latest episode in a pattern." My stomach clenched painfully, but I nodded. "And people believe her sophisticated lies. Some certainly do. She's extremely convincing with her MBA polished presentation skills. And Thomas backs up everything she says without question." The betrayal cut deep, piercing my heart. My own son, the little boy I'd raised alone after his father died when he was only 10, was helping dismantle my reputation and independence piece by calculated piece. "What does she really want?" I whispered, though I already suspected the answer. "Your penthouse, probably. Your carefully built property portfolio. Your savings. Complete control." Rebecca's eyes met mine, unflinching in their honesty. "They usually want something tangible. The psychological warfare is just a calculated means to a very concrete end." I thought about my beautiful penthouse, purchased with the life insurance money after my husband died. It wasn't extravagant, but it was in a prime location where property values had tripled over the years. And there was the small inheritance from my parents, which I'd carefully preserved and grown through smart investments. "I should go," I said suddenly, feeling overwhelmed by the truth. "Thank you for the coffee and your honesty." "Marie," Rebecca called as I stood to leave. "Thursday, 2 p.m. Just think about it. You don't have to face this alone." The community center was a plain brick building that had seen better days. I sat in my car for 15 minutes on Thursday debating whether to go inside. Through the window, I could see a circle of chairs being arranged in a room off the main hallway. An older woman with a bright red scarf was setting out water and cookies, moving with purpose and dignity. Finally, I gathered my courage and walked in, feeling my heart pounding with each step. The woman with the scarf, Eleanor, greeted me immediately with warm recognition. "You must be Marie. Rebecca mentioned you might come." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct and compassionate. "We're just getting started. You're perfectly on time." There were 8 others in the circle, men and women ranging from their 60s to their 80s. Each face told a story of pain, resilience, and a determination I desperately needed to cultivate. As they shared their stories, I listened intently, feeling a strange comfort in their words. The son who gradually took over his mother's finances until she had no access to her own money. The daughter who convinced doctors her father was incompetent so she could sell his farm. The grandson who isolated his grandmother from friends and other family. With each account, I felt something shift inside me, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I wasn't alone in this struggle. What was happening to me wasn't unique or deserved. It was a recognizable pattern, and most importantly, it was something I could actively resist. When my turn came, I spoke haltingly at first. Then, with growing certainty as I described Victoria's systematic campaign, Thomas's complicity, and my increasing fear for my independence and dignity. "The medical power of attorney is deeply concerning," Eleanor said when I finished, her expression thoughtful, but absolutely fixable. "We have a volunteer lawyer who helps our members with exactly these issues. And in the meantime, we need to get you connected with resources to document your mental competency independently, beyond any doubt." For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine flicker of hope, not just for survival, but for reclaiming the life I'd built with such care. As the meeting ended, people exchanged phone numbers and supportive hugs. An elderly man named Richard pressed a book into my hands, a comprehensive guide to elder rights and legal protections. "Knowledge is power," he said simply, his eyes reflecting wisdom earned through experience. "And you're stronger than you realize right now." Walking back to my car, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten slightly. The fear was still there, but alongside it was something new and powerful resolve. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story any longer. I was going to fight for my dignity, my independence, and my future with everything I had. The morning after my first support group meeting, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. The fog of confusion and hurt had lifted, replaced by a powerful sense of purpose that propelled me out of bed before sunrise. My first call was to Dr. Harrison, my trusted physician of 20 years. "Marie," he said warmly, his voice instantly familiar and reassuring. "What can I do for you this morning?" "I need comprehensive cognitive testing," I said without preamble, my voice firm with determination. "And I need the results documented formally, with no room for misinterpretation." There was a brief pause. "May I ask why you're requesting this specifically?" I explained the situation in detail. Victoria's calculated manipulations, Thomas's power of attorney, the spreading rumors about my mental state. Dr. Harrison's tone grew increasingly concerned with each word. "Come in this afternoon," he said finally, his voice now carrying a note of protective anger. "We'll start the process immediately and be extremely thorough." My next call was to Jennifer Klein, the volunteer lawyer Eleanor had highly recommended. She listened calmly as I outlined my situation, asking pointed questions about my assets, legal documents, and family dynamics that revealed her expertise in elder law. "This is unfortunately common," she said when I finished, her voice professional yet compassionate. "But we have several options. First, we revoke that power of attorney immediately. Then we create new advanced directives with someone trustworthy as your agent." "I don't have anyone I can trust completely," I admitted, the words painful to speak aloud after a lifetime of building relationships. "You will," Jennifer assured me confidently. "That's what your support group is for. Building a network of people who genuinely have your best interests at heart." By the end of the week, I had undergone comprehensive cognitive testing results excellent across all measures, revoked Thomas's power of attorney, and filed a formal letter with my bank requiring my in-person verification for any significant withdrawals or changes to my accounts. But the most transformative step came unexpectedly. After our second support group meeting, Eleanor approached me with a flyer in hand. "The community centre is looking for a part-time mentor for their intergenerational program," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "Seniors working with teens after school. I thought of you immediately with your caregiving background." "Me?" I was genuinely stunned by the suggestion. But I haven't worked formally since I retired from my caregiving position 5 years ago. Exactly, Eleanor said with an encouraging smile. You have valuable experience with young people and time on your hands. Plus, she added more gently, it would be good for you to build a life outside of Thomas and Victoria's sphere of influence. The intergenerational program was housed in a bright, welcoming room at the community centre, walls covered with colourful artwork and bookshelves stuffed with resources. 5 other seniors were already volunteering, helping teens with everything from homework to college applications to simply having someone who listened without judgment. Sofia Gonzalez, the program director, greeted me warmly. We especially need help with our creative writing program, she explained, her enthusiasm contagious. Many of our teens struggle to express themselves effectively, and having a supportive adult guide them makes all the difference in their development. I thought about my years teaching and caregiving, the joy I'd felt watching young people discover their voices and potential. I think I can definitely help with that, I said, feeling a spark of excitement for the first time in months. That afternoon, I met Madison, a quiet 16-year-old with bright blue hair and eyes that had clearly seen too much hardship for someone so young. I hate writing, she announced defiantly as we sat down together. That's perfectly okay, I replied, unfazed by her resistance. We can just talk instead about whatever's on your mind. By the end of our session, she had filled 3 pages with her passionate thoughts on the unfairness of her school's dress code. She didn't even realize she was writing until it was done, her surprise evident when she looked at the filled pages. Same time next week? She asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide her interest. I'll be here waiting for you, I promised, feeling something healing inside me. As the weeks passed, my days developed a new rhythm and purpose. Mornings were for practical matters, meeting with Jennifer, organizing my finances, meticulously documenting my independence and capability through photos, receipts and daily journals. Afternoons were dedicated to the community centre, where I now worked with 5 regular students who actually seemed genuinely disappointed if I missed a session. Evenings, once the loneliest part of my day, became time for new pursuits that nourished my spirit. I joined a beginner's computer class at the library, determined to navigate the digital world that had always intimidated me. Richard from the support group introduced me to his community garden group, where I discovered the profound satisfaction of growing my own vegetables and connecting with the earth. I still thought about Thomas every day, the ache of his absence never quite subsiding from my heart. Twice I'd driven past his architectural firm, hoping for just a glimpse of him, wondering if he ever thought about me with the same longing and confusion. But the intense anger that had initially consumed me was gradually fading, replaced by something more complex, the bittersweet understanding that I had to build a fulfilling life that didn't depend on his presence or approval. 1 month after Mother's Day, I received an unexpected text from a number I didn't recognize. Mom, we need to talk. Christmas dinner at our house. Thomas. I stared at the message, my heart racing with conflicting emotions. After weeks of painful silence, after all the hurt and betrayal, this terse demand disguised as an invitation, 6 months away, yet presented as if nothing significant had happened between us. My hands trembled slightly as I typed my response, then paused before sending it, reconsidering. The old Marie would have accepted immediately, grateful for any crumb of attention from her son. The new Marie, growing stronger each day, had learned something vital. I deserved more than crumbs of affection and acknowledgement. I deleted the draft and set my phone aside deliberately. This wasn't a decision I needed to make today or even this week. I had time to consider what was truly best for me, not just what would please Thomas or appease Victoria. For now, I had seeds to plant in the community garden, a writing workshop to prepare for my teens and friends coming over for dinner, friends who saw me clearly and valued what they saw in me. The woman I was becoming would know exactly how to answer Thomas when the time was right, on my terms, not his. The months between Mother's Day and Christmas passed in a wonderful blur of activity and personal growth. By December, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The community centre had hired me part-time to oversee their expanded writing program, recognizing the impact I was having with the teenagers. My garden plot had yielded an abundance of vegetables to share with neighbours and friends. I'd even started a small blog about senior independence, encouraged by my computer class instructor who saw potential in my writing. I thought about Thomas's text message daily, turning it over in my mind like a smooth stone, examining it from all angles. After months of consideration and conversations with my support group, I'd finally decided to accept his Christmas invitation, but entirely on my own terms with clear boundaries. The day arrived cold and clear, snow dusting the ground like powdered sugar. I dressed carefully in a deep burgundy sweater and charcoal slacks, adding my mother's pearl necklace, a symbol of the generations of strong women in my family. In my purse was a folder containing my complete neurological evaluation, legal documents revoking Thomas's power of attorney, and photos of my active, independent life that contradicted Victoria's narrative completely. As I pulled into Thomas and Victoria's driveway, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel despite my preparation. Their house was decorated elaborately for Christmas, lights twinkling from every eave, a giant inflatable Santa bobbing in the yard. Perfectly festive, perfectly excessive, just like Victoria herself with her carefully cultivated image. Thomas opened the door before I could knock. He looked tired, I noticed immediately, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice formal and distant. "Come in." The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, Christmas carols playing softly from hidden speakers creating a perfect holiday atmosphere. Thomas led me to the living room where Victoria sat primly on the sofa, wearing a green velvet dress that matched the tree behind her, every detail of her appearance meticulously controlled. "Marie," she greeted me, her smile tight and forced. "So glad you could make it to our home." I settled into an armchair, noting the physical distance they both maintained. No hugs, no warmth, just polite formality between us. "It's been a long time," I said simply, maintaining my composure. Thomas cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mom, before we have dinner, we wanted to talk to you about what happened in May." He glanced at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly, clearly following a rehearsed script. "Your behavior at church was concerning. We've been worried about you and your well-being." My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady and confident. "My behavior? You mean when I responded to being told I was headed for a nursing home against my will?" Victoria sighed dramatically, playing her part. "That's exactly what we mean, Marie. You completely misinterpreted a light-hearted note. It was just a silly joke between family members." "A joke?" I repeated, reaching into my purse deliberately. "Like how you've been systematically telling people I'm confused. Having episodes? Losing my grip on reality when all evidence shows otherwise?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Mom, we're genuinely concerned about your mental health. That's all this has ever been about. Fortunately, I have excellent doctors who know me well," I replied calmly, withdrawing the folder and placing it on the coffee table between us. "Dr. Harrison conducted a full neurological and cognitive evaluation in June. The comprehensive results are there if you'd like to review them. Perfect scores across the board with above-average results for my age group." Thomas didn't reach for the folder. Victoria's practiced smile faltered visibly. "We've also noticed you've been making some questionable financial decisions lately," Thomas continued, following what was clearly their pre-planned script. "We thought it might be time to discuss simplifying things. Maybe selling the penthouse, moving somewhere with more support and less responsibility." "Thomas," I interrupted gently but firmly, "I've revoked your medical power of attorney, and I've implemented additional security measures on all my financial accounts to protect my assets." The silence that followed was deafening in its completeness. Victoria's face flushed an angry red. "You've what?" Thomas finally said, genuine shock breaking through his controlled facade. "I've taken back control of my life," I answered, my voice surprisingly calm and confident. "And I'm here today to tell you that while I still love you deeply, Thomas, I won't be manipulated or pushed aside in my own life." Victoria stood abruptly, unable to contain her anger. "This is ridiculous." "Thomas, tell her this is absolutely ridiculous." But Thomas was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, surprise certainly, but perhaps also a grudging respect for my stance. "There's something else you should know," I continued, maintaining eye contact with my son. "I've been hired as the creative writing program coordinator at the community centre. I was even interviewed for the local paper last week about our intergenerational initiatives that are making a real difference." That's wonderful, Mom," Thomas said, sounding genuinely surprised by this information. Victoria wasn't accepting this new reality. "A little part-time charity work doesn't mean you're capable of managing your entire life and estate by yourself. I'm not finished," I interrupted, meeting her gaze directly without flinching. I'm also being considered for a speaking role at next month's conference on active aging. They were particularly interested in my perspective on family dynamics and elder independence, given my background in caregiving. Victoria's eyes widened with alarm. You wouldn't dare speak publicly about personal family matters. About what, Victoria? I asked innocently. About how families sometimes mistake independence for incapacity. About how even supposedly well-meaning relatives can undermine a senior's autonomy and dignity. It's all very academic and educational, of course. The implication was clear if they continued their campaign against me. I wouldn't remain silent about their tactics. Thomas placed a restraining hand on Victoria's arm. I think we should have dinner now, he said firmly, showing unexpected backbone. Mom's right. We need to respect her independence and choices. Victoria's mouth opened and closed wordlessly before she stormed toward the kitchen in defeat. Dinner was a tense affair, filled with uncomfortable silences. Victoria barely spoke, focusing intensely on cutting her turkey into increasingly smaller pieces on her plate. Thomas made awkward attempts at conversation, asking about my garden and computer classes with the air of someone discovering a stranger. As I drove home that night, snowflakes dancing in my headlights, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and triumph swirling within me. The relationship with my son had fundamentally changed. Perhaps permanently, but I had stood my ground with dignity. I had spoken my truth clearly, and for the first time in years they had actually heard me. 1 year after the Mother's Day that changed everything. I stood in my living room surrounded by colourful balloons and the warm chatter of friends. My 66th birthday celebration was in full swing, a gathering I had planned myself, inviting the people who had become my chosen family over the past 12 remarkable months. Eleanor was by the window, laughing with Richard as they debated the merits of different tomato varieties for our community garden. Sophia from the community centre was proudly showing photos of our teen writer's recently published anthology to anyone who would look. Madison, my blue-haired writing student, now sporting purple streaks, was carefully setting out cupcakes she had baked herself, each one lovingly decorated with a tiny fondant book. I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the woman looking back at me. She stood straighter than she had a year ago, with a confident posture. Her eyes were brighter, more alive, her smile more genuine and unforced. She looked truly happy and at peace with herself. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my self-reflection. When I opened the door, I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush of surprise. Thomas stood on my porch alone, holding a small wrapped package, his expression uncertain. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Happy birthday." For a moment I couldn't speak, emotion closing my throat. It had been nearly 4 months since our tense Christmas dinner, with only a handful of brief, formal texts between us since then. "Thomas," I finally managed. "I wasn't expecting you today." He shifted uncomfortably on the doorstep. "I should have called first. I can see you're having a celebration with your friends." "No, it's fine." "Please come in." As he followed me inside, I watched my friends notice his arrival with protective concern. Eleanor gave me a subtle nod of support. Madison, who had heard plenty about my son during our writing sessions, observed him with unconcealed curiosity and a touch of suspicion. "Your place looks different," Thomas commented, glancing around with genuine interest. "It's really nice." He was right. Over the past year, I'd transformed my living space along with my life, repainting the walls in warm yellows and blues, replacing heavy curtains with light-filtering blinds, adding bookshelves for my expanding collection of poetry and memoirs that reflected my new journey. "Thank you," I replied, appreciating his observation. "Would you like something to drink? There's punch and coffee available." "Coffee would be great, thanks." In the kitchen, away from curious eyes, Thomas set the package on the counter and took a deep breath. "Mom, I owe you an apology. A big, genuine one." I busied myself with pouring his coffee, unsure how to respond to this unexpected opening. "Victoria and I are separated," he continued, his voice low and strained. "Have been for about 2 months now." I turned to face him, surprised despite having sensed their relationship was troubled. "I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas." "Don't be," he said with a sad smile. "It was a long time coming." After Christmas, I started seeing things more clearly. The way she talked about you, the way she tried to control everything and everyone around her. I realized it wasn't just about you. It was about me, too, and who I was becoming under her influence. I handed him the coffee, our fingers briefly touching in a moment of connection. "What finally happened between you two?" Thomas sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. I found some emails on her laptop. She'd been talking to a real estate agent about your penthouse, getting estimates, discussing quick sale options. She even had draft documents drawn up that would have given us power over your assets and properties. Documents she somehow thought I could convince you to sign away your life with. The revelation should have shocked me deeply. But after everything I'd been through, it merely confirmed what I had long suspected about her intentions. When I confronted her directly, she didn't even deny it. Thomas continued, pain evident in his voice. She just said it was for your own good, and that I needed to be a man and handle my mother properly. That's when I knew I had to leave the marriage. I leaned against the counter, absorbing his words carefully. I'm sorry it came to this point, Thomas. I'm the one who should be profoundly sorry, Mom. I let her come between us. I believed her when she said you were slipping mentally, even though everything I knew about you throughout my life contradicted that completely. I failed you as a son. The simple admission, the acknowledgement of truth I had waited so long to hear, felt like a key turning in a long rusted lock, opening possibilities I had almost given up on. I've missed you terribly, he said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. I've missed my mom and the relationship we used to have. Before I could respond, Madison appeared in the doorway. Marie, everyone's waiting for you to blow out your candles, she announced, eyeing Thomas suspiciously, protectively. I'll be right there, I promised her. To Thomas, I added, will you stay for the celebration? He hesitated, clearly uncertain. Are you sure? This is your special day with your friends. I don't want to intrude where I'm not welcome. You won't be intruding, I said with genuine feeling. But things are different now, Thomas. I'm different in fundamental ways. I can certainly see that, he said with what seemed like genuine admiration in his eyes. You seem stronger, happier, more fulfilled than I've seen you in years. I am, I confirmed with quiet confidence. I've built a life I truly love, Thomas. A life that belongs to me. If you want to be part of it going forward, I'd welcome that possibility. But it has to be on terms of mutual respect and understanding. He nodded slowly, processing my words. I understand completely, and I want to try if you'll give me that chance. As we rejoined the party, I introduced Thomas to my friends, watching as he made a genuine effort to connect with these people who had become so important to me during his absence. When Richard shared amusing stories about our community garden mishaps, Thomas laughed with genuine amusement. When Sophia mentioned the teen writing program, he asked thoughtful questions about its impact. When Madison grudgingly admitted she wanted to study architecture in college, his face lit up as he offered to show her his firm's projects sometime, making a real connection. Later, after the candles had been blown out and gifts opened with much joy, I found myself standing on my back porch with Thomas, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a moment of peaceful beauty. Your present, he said suddenly, remembering the small package he'd set aside earlier. You never opened it in all the excitement. I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful silver picture frame. Inside was a faded photograph I hadn't seen in years, one I thought was lost forever, showing me holding 5-year-old Thomas on my lap as we read a book together, both of us laughing at something long forgotten but precious. I found it when I was packing my things, he explained softly. It reminded me so vividly of who we used to be to each other, who we could be again maybe, with time and effort. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger, emotion tightening my throat as memories flooded back. I'd like that very much, I said finally, my voice thick with feeling. But it will take time to rebuild what was broken. I have time, he said simply, and patience, and hope. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above us, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past year, from humiliation to liberation, from isolation to community, from fear to strength and self-determination. The Mother's Day bouquet that had once symbolized such cruelty had ironically been the catalyst for my transformation and growth. I had lost the comfort of blind trust, but gained something far more valuable: self-reliance, true friendship, and a sense of purpose that no one could take from me. And maybe, just maybe, I was gaining back a son who finally saw me clearly for who I truly am. Happy birthday, Mom, Thomas said softly beside me, his voice carrying a new respect. For the first time in a very long time, it truly was happy in the deepest sense of the word.